Hello everybody and welcome to the YouTube character profile re-upload for Ivy Brennan. This was episode 33 on the podcast that we recorded this originally, so jolly long time ago, and we thought it was about time that we put it back up for your listening pleasure. Gemma, since we recorded this a long time ago, both of us have got to know and love Ivy a lot more, haven't we?
Yes, more than not at all.
More than not at all. You might find as you're listening to this that we maybe sound like we don't know what we're talking about. We're maybe just reading some notes down.
We never let
that's
that
how it was in
stop
the
us.
old days.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I don't know how long is this? Half an hour or so? 20 minutes? I don't know.
About 20 minutes. Most of it's about Catholics.
Is it? Well, Ivy was well known for being Catholic and
Well, don't spoil
a
it.
ghost.
Catholic ghost.
I since we recorded this, first I watched a bit of Ivy on the classic Coronation Street episodes on ITV3, and I was absolutely enthralled by her story. I think she gets a really bad rap. She doesn't go. She's not really a favourite, is she, of Coronation Street fans? She's well remembered, but everyone kind of hates her.
Do they?
But I thought
I
I really sympathised with the struggles that she was going through, especially after Brian died. And those scenes that we watched after Brian's death were so well acted by Lynne Perry. I thought she did such a fab job. And then all the story about her, trying to contact him through the medium and getting Nicky involved in the church so that he could be closest to his dad. It was so sad. I thought I absolutely adored this character.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, we've now watched them on the DVDs, and you got to see them, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I thought she was great. She is incredibly scary, though.
In what way?
Well, wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of her.
No, I think you're right.
Gail was a bit of a bitch to her, don't you?
I think they're both bitches to each other, really.
I think that Gail gets away with it. I think that everyone kind of takes Gail's side a bit, but
yeah, they absolutely do. I mean, she is known as Poison Ivy among the old school Corrie fans, isn't she? And I think probably Lynn lived up to that a little bit. She tried to push the character in a bit of a nasty direction, but she was so well characterized, and she stood up for her beliefs, didn't she? She did not waver, and I really admired that in the character, despite how difficult she made life for lots of the other characters. I loved her friendship with Vera in the factory. I thought it was fascinating how she came into the program being a completely different person. Not that we saw very much of the early Ivy, did we?
No, but it was quite funny because in this what you're about to listen to, we talk about how weird it would be if they retconned a random character, say for example Beth.
Oh, don't say what we do have quite an interesting prediction, don't we?
Yeah.
Was that we were talking about, because I must admit I've not listened to this in 9 years. But you said we were talking about something, and then we made a prediction about Beth that later came true.
Yes.
So listen out for that,
That's
everybody. Anyway. Love Ivy. Fantastic character. Really gets a bad rap, and I don't know whether listening to this upcoming profile will change your mind on her.
I think we need to redo some of these.
I think we do. I think this needs to be one that we go back to. But anyway, if you like a bit of Ivy, then I hope you enjoy this. So back to you, Gemma and Michael of the past. Okay, it's our classic character profile time. We have a new Pope this week.
Yeah.
Pope Francis.
The first.
But anyway, that's not our character profile. We're not doing a character profile on the Pope.
We're not talking about religion.
No, but what we are talking about is the most Catholic member of Coronation Street that people will probably remember, Ivy Brennan, or Ivy Tilsley as most people will remember her, or Poison Ivy, which was her nickname back at the time.
Was she in Batman?
Not that Poison Ivy.
That would be cool. A sideline as like an evil villain.
Ivy was born on the 8th of April 1936. She died on the 23rd of August 1995. That was off screen. Her parents were Jim and Alice Nelson. She had one sibling, Sheila Nelson. She married, well, we'll talk about her possible other marriages in a minute, but the canon marriages were Bert Tilsley in 1956.
That's a good name, Bert.
Bert, good old
50s name.
And Don Brennan in 1988. She had one dear child, Brian, who was born in 1958, and she was a bit of a pushy mother to him, shall we say. Ivy first appeared on the 14th of June 1971, and her last appearance on Corrie was on the 25th of March 1994. That was must have been just before I started watching it, because I don't remember ever seeing Ivy on it. But I do remember that I
brilliant
watched.
character profile.
I remember that. Oh no, I've seen her in the classic episodes on Granada Plus. But I do remember that I did watch it in 1994, so that must have been the kind of the cut-off point for me. She appeared in 1,171 episodes. She was a factory worker by trade, and she was played by Lynne Perry. So, what can we say about Ivy Tilsley? You probably can't say very much at all. Your silence says everything. Just read some of the notes that I've made. It's very the first 10 years or so of her time on Coronation Street were pretty interesting, because she was much more of a side character. She didn't live on the street at all, and the writers obviously couldn't decide what they were going to do with her background. She was first credited as being Ivy Tilsley, a bit like Catherine Tilsley. So they'd changed the spelling of that. And she was married to somebody called Wilf when she came into it, but we never saw this Wilf, I don't think. I think she just talked about him. That was sort of quickly dropped. By 1975, she was Ivy Tilsley, as she later became the spelling of it. And she spoke about her and her husband Jack, so this other made-up character.
Was she just insane?
Maybe. They talked about how that they couldn't conceive. They were trying to have a baby but couldn't. But then by 1979, when she moved into the street, she was married to Bert, and they had this 20-year-old son, Brian. And I can't imagine anything like that happening these days. I think because of the internet and people remembering and archiving things, I don't think they could change a character's backstory quite so much, so that they could have sort of 3 different husbands. But I mean, if it's only a side character, it'd be like, I don't know, who's like the side character in the factory at the moment that...
Beth. It'd be like Beth talking about her having...
Yeah, it would, wouldn't it? Like in 10 years' time, it turns out that Beth is actually already married or something.
Yeah, and she's got another kid, but he's grown up and she never mentioned him for some reason.
And I just can't imagine that happening anymore.
I can.
Well, during most of the 1970s, or some of the 1970s, Ivy worked at Mark Britton Warehouse, which is the one that was where the Maisonettes are at the moment. But then that burned down. And she got a job in Mike Baldwin's was it his denim factory or something? I don't know about then. In 1972, we find out that this husband cheated on her, and she was staying with Elsie Howard at the time, with Alan Howard for a little while, and she began a relationship with George Harrop, the storeman at the warehouse. 1975 was when it burnt down, and that's when Ivy got a job at Baldwin's Casuals, and she grew up to be, well, she was quickly supervisor, and one of the things that she's remembered for is she was very interfering, and I think she quite liked being supervisor because it sort of gave her ideas above her station a little bit, but also if there was any kind of problems in the factory, she was very good at standing up for the girls and kind of going to Mike and sort of telling him what for, really.
Was that around the time the unions were having lots of
probably
issues?
It sounds, maybe, yeah.
So that would have been very popular with the sort of the core audience.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they thought a lot of people could resonate with that, I'm sure. So in 1979, they moved into number 5, which is where Fizz lives now. Although the fourth wall was on a different side, I think, interestingly. Brian and Gail got married, and they moved in as well. I think they couldn't afford to get anywhere else. Now, Ivy really wanted Gail to convert to Catholicism, because it wasn't until 1979 really that they developed the super religious side to Ivy, and she was dead against Brian even having anything to do with Gail, because she wasn't Catholic, and Gail was like, no, I'm not gonna turn Catholic. But Ivy became sort of very interfering, and that's when she became sort of the Poison Ivy character that lots of people remember.
So when they had her being Catholic, because obviously this isn't a Catholic country, and Catholicism is very much a minor religion here. Were they using the fact that she was Catholic to make her seem more? Is that
she was very religious. She had very strong religious views.
Were they afraid of offending like the Anglicans? by having her seem like she's being unreasonable because she's so religious. So they thought, oh, make her Catholic. So we only annoy the Catholics. And there's only 3 of them.
I don't know. Maybe.
I just don't know.
It was quite good that it did cause a lot of conflict, which is what you want in a drama. And
because I definitely would say that there are not very many. I mean, I don't. But then again, you don't really know very much about people's religions these days, do you?
No, it's not such a big issue. No.
I mean, the only person on the street who says what religion they are is Sophie.
Yeah, we all know that Emily's sort of Christian.
Yeah.
She doesn't go on about it very much. Even Sophie doesn't too much nowadays.
People are more likely to tell her that she's a Christian than she is to bring up herself.
Yeah. Do you think it's a bit of a taboo subject?
Yeah, definitely.
It shouldn't be, really. I mean,
well, it's a very big part of people's private lives.
Yeah, I guess in modern times, not as many people are religious anyway.
We absolutely hated it when it was all to do with Sophie and Sean being lesbian Christians, didn't we?
Yeah.
Because we were like, where are you going with this? It just seems like you're really not... And they didn't even seem to know where they were going themselves, because they wanted to criticise the church for not accepting homosexuals.
Yeah.
But at the same time, who are they to say... How can Coronation Street criticise people's religions?
Mm.
I just don't know. It just seems like such a minefield to go down for an entertainment show that can get just as much mileage out of people having affairs.
Well, they can't seem to write religious characters that aren't really uber religious, can they? If you're Christian, I mean, this is especially when Sophie converted. That's all she would talk about, isn't it? It's like you can't be religious without being a religious nut job.
In a British soap.
Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? But I do find it interesting that she was Catholic, and I did think it was relevant to point out that, in case you didn't realise, if you're from overseas, it's quite a unique sort of trait that is worth pointing out.
It would be really interesting to have more characters from other religions as well, as a kind of a way of kind of teaching us who don't know about that sort of thing about it. Because I
do cringe when they go down that route of all Jews do this. Do you know what I mean? Because that you can't have a character representing somebody or a group of people without generalising really badly and offending people.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I really did like, going along those lines, was when Dev and Sunita got married and we got to see a Hindu ceremony. That was really fascinating. Did you watch that?
Don't remember it.
Because it was amazing, all bright and colourful, and then Sunita came along and got arrested, but never mind. The actual seeing the ceremony itself, that was a really good way of, I guess, showing people about what Hindu wedding ceremonies were like, because I bet a lot of people just wouldn't have any idea.
No, I mean, nobody's ever invited me to their Hindu wedding.
No.
A bit selfish.
Anyway, we've gone off track a little bit.
I've sidetracked because I've got no idea
You don't know anything to say about Ivy, do you?
No.
Anyway, in 1980, then Gail and Brian moved into their own house together. There was too much tension between Ivy and Gail, and Ivy.
So I have to also point out here that I found out the other day, hilariously, that in Italy apparently you can get divorced if you can prove to the court that your husband doesn't stop his mother from interfering with your marriage. And also there's a certain statistic whereby the amount of miles away you live from your mother-in-law, the greater the chance of your marriage succeeding.
How funny.
So I think that they were right to move into a different house, if only to just bump that percentage up a tiny few points.
Over the early 1980s, Bert was very much in and out of work. He spent lots of time on the dole, so things were difficult for him and Ivy.
He really should just move in with Ernie and leave it.
In December 1982, it got even worse because he broke his arm, and he was told that he may have had a stroke. I think I might remember watching this on the classic episodes. He fell off a ladder or something, if I remember rightly, or I may be totally making that up. But he was informed that he couldn't work with machinery again, which was bad in his line of work.
A little bit.
Yeah. In 1984, he died. He'd had another stroke. He'd been in a psychiatric hospital because I think he'd been working over at the garage, and then he was pumping up a tyre and he didn't know how it worked, and it exploded, and so he ended up in a coma for a bit, and when he came out he was sort of never himself again, and he ended up having to be sent into this psychiatric hospital. So that was the end of Bert.
That's proper tragedy, that is.
Oh well, it gets even worse for Ivy later, 5 years later.
With a kebab man.
In 1985, Ivy started seeing George Wardle, who was a van driver at Baldwin's. He eventually proposed to her, but she turned him down because he was a divorcee and they couldn't marry at church. So that kind of gives you an idea about how important Ivy's religion was to her.
Well, no, because you can't. Like, my nan's neighbours were Catholic, and they wouldn't come to my granddad's funeral.
Why?
Because it wasn't Catholic.
Oh, right, okay.
So,
I
guess.
Later on in the 80s, Gail has this affair, and we've mentioned this when we did Gail's character profile, with Ian Latimer, who I think was Brian's cousin, and she gets pregnant. Now, this is when she was pregnant with Sarah Louise, and we didn't know who the father was, whether it was going to be Brian or Ian, and Ivy finds out about this, and even though the baby is revealed to be Brian's, Ivy never really accepts Sarah Lou, and to her, Nicky was, he was called Nicky back then, but it's Nick now, was kind of the main grandchild for her, because he was the one that was kind of the proper, definitely born in wedlock, born when there were happy times between Gail and Brian. In 1987, she met Don Brennan, a fellow Catholic widower, and they...
Score!
Yeah.
Hooray!
And they married the next year, but they were more companions rather than lovers. They wanted somebody to spend their twilight years with.
Aww, just like Gloria.
Yeah. Tragedy, 1989. Brian died. We've seen that scene. That's a very frequently shown clip with him getting stabbed up against the wall against this nightclub. Obviously devastating for Ivy, because she'd only lost her husband 5 years or so ago, and Brian was all she had left, and she was already very, very, very protective of him, and it kind of made her turn towards God even more. She became even more religious, even more interfering in Nick's life, which really, really irritated Gail, and she was just always going on about Brian and Bert, and wanted to do stuff to preserve their memory, and Don was getting very, very upset by this, because last thing you want when you just got married is for your new wife to be going on about their dead ex-husband. In 1991 was when Gail married Martin, who was much younger than her, and Ivy really, really wasn't happy with that. And things were made even worse when Nicky and Sarah Lou's names were changed to Platt, because it was like cutting off the Tilsley line. And Nick did go back to being Nick Tilsley later on, because that's what he is now, obviously. Mm-hmm. She started...
Well, to be fair, if I had a choice between Platt and Tilsley...
that's true. She started drinking heavily then. And even though she was a very kind of uptight, kind of naggy, sort of interfering old woman, she wasn't just that. She wasn't just like Blanche criticising. You did often see kind of the good side of her, and when she was having a laugh with her mate Vera and everything. So she wasn't just a nasty piece of work.
So this was in 1992 when Don started an affair with barmaid Julie Dewhurst.
Yes.
Did you skip this line?
Did I?
Yeah, you just said that Ivy started drinking. She discovered the affair.
Oh yeah, I missed that. Yeah.
So Julie broke up with Don. He tried to commit suicide, and he just lost his lower left leg, which raises so many questions about what he was trying to do. So yeah,
it was a car accident.
That's when Ivy starts drinking.
An accident.
She loses her job.
Yeah, she was working at Better Buys.
And Don can't put up with it and leaves her.
Yeah. And then very quickly in 1994, she was whisked away to a convent. And the following year, she had a stroke and died. And
now, I'm not surprised, because we've just watched a show about nuns.
Oh, yeah, we've just watched American Horror Story Series 2.
Yeah, great. And if they were anything like the nuns that were in that, it probably didn't take very long for her to die.
This was when Lynne Perry got cosmetic surgery on her lips without asking the producer's permission, and they sacked her.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Because even after Ivy died, her storyline continued. Nick blamed Don for it because he'd recently been to the convent to ask her for a divorce, and I think Nick said, well, that's what finished her off. And in the will, she left nothing to Don or Sarah Louise, but said that Nick could have the house if he changed his name back to Tilsley. And I do remember watching that. So that was.
How long did it take him to say yes, hell yes, give me the house?
Not probably very long. So he got the house, he changed his name. Gail obviously didn't like it, and there was a bit of friction there. But Don carried on living there as a tenant until he started going mad a few years later.
It's up to everyone what their own names are.
In 1996, we got one of the most bizarre storylines when Vera thought she saw Ivy's ghost upstairs at number 5. And I remember going upstairs and going, ah!
2 years after she died.
Yeah. But to me, Ivy she might as well have been dead 10 years, because when I was watching it back then, the character meant nothing to me. And then Sarah Louise also became convinced that she'd seen her as well. And there was this whole storyline about the street being haunted, and I think it was a bit of a joke. And then I think the joke, I think that was when Jack and Vera were landlords and landlady of the Rovers, and then they said that Vera moved into the Rovers, and Jack was making a big thing of it. He had a T-shirt that said, "Come and see our spirits" or something. Because I think Mike Baldwin had to print a T-shirt printing, or Steve or someone did.
That's really funny.
It was really funny. And then in the end, Don had to hire a fake exorcist to get rid of her.
I love ghosts.
Yeah, you'd have liked that storyline. It was very funny. And that was it for Ivy, apart from in 2006 when her diary was discovered by Sophie. And that's when David found out that he was going to be aborted. We've already kind of talked about that, haven't we?
Dear diary, today my hideous daughter-in-law Gail tried to murder my unborn grandchild.
Yeah.
Speak soon.
So, like I said, she was fired for having cosmetic surgery. Well, some people say it was that, some people say they just ran out of things to do with her, but I'm more inclined to believe the cosmetic surgery story.
Why would you fire someone for just running out of things and then make up a story about...
Well, I think... Well, I don't know.
It doesn't make any sense.
I remember in my ICT suite back in my secondary school when there was some work up on the wall, and some of them with some newspaper articles that children had written, and one of them was just that story about her being fired for having lips, and that was the first that I'd ever knew about Ivy, was a bit of writing about her on my IT suite wall. Lynne was rather bitter about it, and she went on to appear in lots of chat shows, including a very famous episode of The Word that saw her singing "I Will Survive," and she looked a bit desperate, this kind of old lady tottering about the stage.
They couldn't really have written in that her character would have had cosmetic surgery.
No, that's the thing, it wouldn't have fitted her at all. No. Well, the fact that she went on and did all this chat show, she even made an appearance on Television X. That shows just how different.
What that is?
It's an adult station, shall we say?
I don't want to know more.
No, I don't know anymore. I didn't want to delve any further. So I think it just went to show just how different Lynne was from her on-screen counterpart. She wrote a kiss and tell autobiography called Secrets of the Street, and that kind of said what went on behind the scenes, and it said what she really thought about her co-stars.
She does sound really bitter, doesn't she?
Oh yes,
awesome.
Oh yes. But unfortunately, things didn't turn out very well for her in the end. She ended up as a celebrity bingo caller, after-dinner speaker. She battled a drink problem. There was an episode of Shooting Stars that she was on, which is a panel quiz show where she was drunk.
Allegedly.
Yeah, well, apparently.
We have to say allegedly. None of this is our opinion.
No, I've never even seen it. And then she died in 2006.
She went to us then. That's great.
It's okay. It's a shame what happened to her, really, because I mean she's quite a famous character. Everybody who was watching it back then sort of knows straight away who Ivy is. She's one of the big names, and to see her get sacked like that, and then for her to end up her life sort of with a drink problem, it's pretty sad, really. It's the price of fame. She's said, "I've been haunted by Ivy ever since I left. After she died, they brought her back as a ghost. I didn't want to go out because people kept stopping me and talking to me as Ivy. I became a prisoner in my own home. I was going to bed and swallowing sleeping tablets. I was going crazy. So she was obviously having a really hard time with it. It's a shame. But, well...
Yeah.
What can you say?
You can't say anything else. It was a shame.
Yeah.
So we talked about your talking points.
Yeah, I was going to write down...
Religion in Corrie.
Yeah. So that's Ivy.
So what was our conclusion? Religion in Corrie. We want more. Is that what we said, or did we say no?
More, but not making them religious nut
It's
jobs.
hard. It's so hard, like we said, because you've got to have them represent everybody, and you can't ever do that with one character.
No.
Unless you sort of you move, or you get them all to join a cult.
Yeah, well, there was a cult storyline back in the late 90s. I think people kind of like to forget that happened. But no, it could come back again. That's it for Ivy Tilsley this week.